I tried to get like just like a nice list, and I think this will be, in the future just helpful, like for me, even like when I'm, all right, I got to make this track work, and what can I do? And I can just click on my little slideshow and check. So I'll make sure this goes into the Discord so everyone can have it at their own disposal. But here goes. So the thing that I think we got to all think about, and this is so big with everything in music, but it's all about contrast. We want to show changes, right? Like we have one section moving into the next section. We want to show changes. And there are lots of ways we could do it. And um, I think it's good to think about like how things in music are relative to each other. Like think about like volume. Um, is it loud or is it quiet? How do you know? You have to compare to something else. Is it loud if I clap my hand? Is it loud if uh, I don't know, break a window or something? It depends on the circumstance. If I'm in a room and there's a heavy metal band playing, I clap my hand, you won't even hear it. It's too quiet. If it's the middle of the night and you're trying to sleep and I clap my hand, then you're going to probably hear it. So it's good to think about the relativity of sounds. So if you want a sound to be big, for instance, you need something that sounds small. It'll only sound large and big if it's next to or following something that was small. So again, to make an analogy for you, is like King Kong big? That depends what King Kong's standing next to. If he's standing next to me, he's giant. If he's standing next to the planet Jupiter, he's small. He's insignificantly small. So if you want a big sound, you might have to make a sacrifice on another sound, make it sound smaller, quieter, turn it down a little bit, maybe EQ away some of the frequencies, take some of the bass out of it. And then the next sound that comes in will feel much larger. I've got quiet versus loud, we kind of talked about. So in order for a part to sound loud, the part before it has to sound quiet. And if you want a quiet part, you need something loud to change from. And, growing up listening to rock bands, and especially like in the 90s with like Nirvana, the Pixies, all of those bands. Oh, we got a new person. Let's admit them. Um, the whole like kind of trick of that music was quiet, loud, quiet, loud. They would have a quiet part, usually clean guitars, bass, drums. And then when the part changed, they would step on their distortion pedals and it would get loud. And that was how they did a lot of their transitions and changes. They just changed the volume. I saw an interview recently with Dave Grohl talking about how Dave Grohl, the drummer from Nirvana, how he would just like watch Kurt Cobain's foot for when he was going to step on the pedal for the distortion. Then he knew he would start playing louder. And I just want to say hi to Paul. I saw Paul just came in. So what's up, Paul? Welcome. We're kind of just starting on this topic. So great timing. Another thing to think about is your track like dense? Is it sparse? Do you have a lot of sounds going on? You really will only know if you have a lot of sounds going on if you have something else to compare it to that doesn't have a lot. And that can really create a nice transition. If you go from a huge chorus with all this stuff happening, and then things get real sparse to maybe just a couple instruments, the listener will really feel that. You can think about panning stuff too. And this is something I like to do. In the chorus, I make things nice and wide. In the verses, things get a little smaller and narrower. So even with guitars, I'll like have like the guitar in the verse, it'll just be like on the left. Then when the chorus comes in, either I'll or it might be right down the middle even. When the chorus comes, I might put another guitar on the right hand side, so then it gets wider. Or I'll take that one in the middle and make another one on either side, or just move things around. Just changing the positioning of sounds can really affect how they come across. And then even like fast versus slow, or do you have fast notes, slow notes? I'm not even necessarily talking about BPM. The BPM can stay the same, but does this part have a lot of quarter notes, half notes, and then maybe the next part has faster notes, eighth notes, 16th notes? You can also play around with the BPM a little bit. People don't do that a lot anymore because we just use the grid and the metronome. But you can create some energy and changes by slowly automating things. The tendency for most musicians is when things get more exciting, like in choruses, they speed up. And when things kind of like mellow out, they slow down. So you can automate the BPM and use that to create these changes in contrast too. And you don't even have to do a lot. A lot of times it can just be barely or totally unnoticeable unless you're like, you know, playing along with a metronome, but just a little bit can actually go quite a long way. That's kind of like, I guess, the biggest concept, though, contrast. So let me move on to the next, changing the elements of the song. I've heard this a few times now. A little guideline when you want to show a change in your music, change at least 3 different things. Have 3 things change. That could mean taking a couple things out and adding something. That can be adding 3 new things. That can be taking 3 new things away, but 3 different things. Listener probably won't really perceive a change too much if only 1 or 2 things change. But once it becomes like 3, then it starts to be good. And that also does depend how many different things are in your track. If there's 100, we're not going to notice 3. But if there's 5 and 3 of them do something different, that's going to be noticeable. Just some ideas, really. Change the chords, new chord progressions, start on a new chord, have maybe go to like the relative minor key. Anything really, just a new chord progression, new speed of the chords would work too. New drum beats always help. So whether you get more or less busy, you change that. Going to halftime beats. So instead of like boom, bop, you go boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop. Like that can really change the feeling of the track. And double timing it too. That's another way. Just the opposite. Instead of boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, bop. And that would make a noticeable change for the listener, especially with drums, because that's the pulse of the song in a lot of cases. Drum groove change, of course. Yeah, just the overall groove. Is it like laid back? Is it ahead of the beat? Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. So new melodies. This is something I like to do a lot, especially even within parts. Changing like the vocal melody. Maybe it does the same thing twice. The third time is different, and then the fourth time it does the original, or the last 2 times it's different. But that could be instrumental melodies too. New instruments, of course. So sometimes it's really nice to have sounds only come in on certain parts. I often get tempted to, when I add a new instrument, I want to play it on like the whole song. But I find that often if I just save it for one part, it makes that part a little special, and it kind of gives you something to like look forward to. And then if you have, say, like a bridge after the second chorus and this new sound comes in, it's like, oh, something different. We feel that more. I think that's especially effective as time goes by in a song. Um, for instance, even if you just take a drum kit, right? If you just start with the hi-hat holding down a quarter note, and then you add a kick after 4 bars, then you add a snare drum after another 4 bars, then you start adding percussion after another 4 bars. It feels like a new element is added every time. But if you just start with the full beat, then it's just one thing. Those are the drums. We just have drums. But when you bring things in one at a time, oh, there's the hi-hat. Oh, now we have a kick drum. Oh, now we have a snare. You take that one idea of the drum part and you sort of like extend it and break it apart into its different pieces. Well, I don't know. Any thoughts on any of that stuff? You guys with me here? Cool. Any questions or anything? Take a little sip of water. Okay. I'll carry on.
Well, I'll throw in something here with that. I've Most of my time I basically setting up Ableton as an instrument,
Mm-hmm.
and then I play the instrument. But one of the things I've been having some interesting sounds come out of is with the uh, MIDI Fighter Twister that I got several months ago.
Yeah.
I found that if I put several scales along the bottom and feed everything out of one MIDI track and have the other tracks following along that MIDI session, with just the press of a button, I can change the scale, I can change the key, I can run the same MIDI pattern and make it dynamic, make it changeable across multiple tracks just by running a 4 or 8 bar pattern, and then you change the scale. Then you can
Hmm.
change the type of scale, change the key, and it follows along with what you're saying there about how to build things and kind of move through a theme
Hmm.
and make it interesting.
That's cool. And then that's sort of like ready for you, right? Like you don't have to
Yeah,
think about it too much. That's a decision that's made for you to kind of go back to where we started, right?
yep.
Yeah, but that's cool. That's just to have like those options like at your fingertips, ready to go. You're liking the MIDI fighter, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really great. It's a little daunting because you have so many possibilities. You can
Hmm.
and the more you get to know it, the more you are trying to kind of customize it to each big project that you have, and it can get kind of tedious. In fact, I've put together a spreadsheet just to keep track of how I have the knobs set, and working up a template and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's really a great device for what I like to do.
Mm. I mean, that's great, because then it's totally yours to customize. You have a
Yep.
lot of options, and it never gets old that way. Very nice. I see Paul wrote in the chat here. How about broad effects like reverb, chorus, delay? Thinking of songs that have a verse that sounds close and intimate, followed by a chorus that's big, echoey, and wide. That's a great idea, and I didn't put that in there. Um, but changing the effects, I'll probably put that in. I'll add it in right now. Um, adding like having like the things grow, get bigger. I'm adding it to my slideshow. I don't know if it's going to show up here. Let's see. Google will take a moment to update, I suppose. But that's a great idea, really is, because it just again, it's like you're trying to like make the listener notice something. There we go, new effects. It's like, and effects are a great way to do that. I love that. Let's see here. Okay, go back to our show here. So anticipation. That's a big one. I think so much about music is like tension and release, creating like something's coming, something's about to happen, and then the payoff of it happening. And we can play around with that. We can build the anticipation, and we can even sometimes postpone it or like trick the listener into thinking something's going to happen or thinking things aren't going to happen and sudden changes. So along those lines, yeah, we want to let the listener know something is about to happen. I think traditionally from my playing, like with rock bands, like the drum fill is like one of the biggest change notifications that happen. Especially if you have a drummer that will actually play a beat straight and not do too much craziness, you get used to the beat. It sort of like hypnotizes you a little bit, and then when the rolls come in, the fills, the different parts of the drum, the tom drums, that all really helps notify you that something's going to happen. And that can also just be silence too. Sometimes some of the best fills are not playing. I think you hear that a lot in a lot of hip hop music, where the drums will just cut out and like you really just feel, because it's so drum heavy and it's so reliant on like, especially the kick drum, that when it doesn't happen, you really notice like, whoa, something's missing here. And that same idea though can happen on instruments, little melodic flourishes, little riffs, little things at the end of a phrase, at the end of a bar. That'll let us know something's going to happen. Singers might do it, little runs or changing the note, going to a higher note. All of that creates some sort of anticipation. Swells, stuff that rises up and swells. So feedback, guitar feedback, maybe like I just did the guitar feedback pack, and that's the big one in a lot of rock music, is just that like screeching guitar swelling up. It lets you know like something, that sound, it's like something's about to blow, like a bomb's going to go off or something. And you can use that really nicely. We talked a little bit about some of this, I think, before we really hit the record button, but anything that kind of like approaches, gets bigger, can be really effective. It's so popular in electronic music to use the white noise riser that might increase in volume, but it also gets filtered. So a lot of times the white noise risers will start out really dull, and then the frequencies are opened up and all the high frequencies slowly get let through, that kind of thing. And it makes that feeling of something approaching. In general, things that are further away are duller sounding, so you can make it feel like it's getting closer by starting it out with less of the high frequency content and then allowing it in, opening it up with a filter or an EQ. We have reverse cymbals are really common, so just taking a cymbal and reversing it. That's a great one. You hear that all the time as well, especially in electronic music. A lot of the swells too, they'll like really build up and then it'll cut, get silent. So you've built up, you've taken this part, it's swelled almost like maximum, volume and energy, and then it just drops. And you've got that moment of like almost floating in space, and then the next part comes in. That again is creating some contrast between parts. I see we've got the truck riser shout out that we were talking about earlier. So it could be, a truck driving by down the street from far away, a motorcycle or something. It really can work well. It's the same effect, really, of something approaching, getting closer, more intense, louder. You said, you can get a garbage truck pass by sound effects somewhere. That would be great. Yeah. Yeah, or literally just go on the street and wait for a car to drive by. Stay out of the street when you do that. But yeah, it's a great idea. Reverse reverbs are nice too. So that's I should link. I'll find a link for like a tutorial on this. But basically, the reverse reverb is this effect where the reverb swells up before the sound. And you can do that by taking a sound, recording the reverb onto another track, reversing that reverb. So normally reverb fades out, it decays away. But when you reverse it, it will sound like it's swelling up to the next part. And you can get like a nice little effect there with your swells. Silences, I think, are huge. I kind of mentioned them already, but just sudden silences, something builds up to maximum and then gets silent. That will create a little shock, a little like tension for the listener, like, whoa, where'd it go? And then it comes back. I find introducing new parts, new melodic ideas every couple bars, halfway through a part, every 8 bars or so is really helpful. It kind of builds the intensity of the part. It makes it feel like it's developing and evolving. Kind of lets the listener know something is about to happen. And you can think of like your musical cadences too for like chord progressions. Um, there are certain chords that like want you to go to the next chord. They lead you there, especially the 5 chord. It just wants to resolve back to the 1 or even to the minor, the relative minor, the 6 chord. Um, they're powerful progressions. So even if you have a song with a chord progression that doesn't have a 5 or even a 4, um, you can then add that in, and that will create like a lot of energy. Like it wants to go to that next part. And another thought on that is extending a part or a chord. So if you have like a 16 bar part and say the last chord is that 5 chord kind of like leading you to the next chord, what if you added an extra 2 bars just to like keep that build going? You know, we've like grown accustomed to things changing every 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, but what if you just threw in a couple extra to keep that going? Um, that can be pretty powerful too, because it's like, oh, it's still building. Oh, I thought it was gonna end. Oh man, when's it gonna end? And then, then you give them the payoff also. Suspended chords are great. Yeah, yeah, definitely. They got those like nice leading tones in them. Um, and sometimes you can get away with like sneaky little things, adding notes that don't go in your song if you're using them to bridge the gap between the next note you're going to get to or the next chord you're going to get to. Yeah, spicy note, right? A little dangerous. Sometimes you gotta move through those a little faster, but hey, if you want to really build tension, and tension is all about like things pushing against each other. There's not enough space. You need to make room. That can be very effective to like really lean into some of those leading tones and suspended chords and things. And also just don't give it all away too early. Um, I kind of feel like a song should sort of like, not always, I guess, but it should often like keep building. There should be a reason to listen past the first chorus. So if you kind of do it all right in the beginning, there's really like not much to happen later on. Sometimes that's making the first verse happen, then going into another verse before you get to that chorus. Give them the build, like it's gonna change, and then don't give it to them. Start again, move back, tease a little bit, cat and mouse type of thing. I find that can be really effective because it just makes you like, oh, I thought it was coming, but I was surprised. And having your track surprise people is kind of important. On to the next slide. I have 2 more, just so you know. 2 more slides here. We can talk about how we can connect sections. So if you're using Ableton Live, and especially if you're using Session View, it's very easy to like have these loops. You have one scene that's just a loop that kind of goes into itself. And then when you switch to the next part, the next scene, maybe that's like your chorus, it can feel like very abrupt and sudden. And that can feel unnatural. And I think right, when we first started this talk here, Joe was talking about like, how do you know when it feels like a song? How do you put it together? And I think this stuff, the connecting the section stuff, can help make it feel like it's not just part A, then part B, then part A, then part B, but like kind of like a development and an evolution into part A a little more. So I think there should be some continuity between sections. You definitely want to have things change, but there should be something that like keeps it in the same song. Otherwise, it might sound like a whole new song every time the parts change. And that can be like similar instruments, of course. That usually helps a lot. But let's see. Sounds that overlap. So parts that maybe start before the next section, like a melody, an instrument that comes in, maybe its first 2 notes happen a bar or 2 into the previous part and they lead into them. Or it could be like those swells, like those white noise risers can rise up to the part and then fade off into the next part. Even like cymbal crashes from one section to the next can be helpful. But I think that helps a lot. Most musicians, if you were playing live musicians, they would kind of like lead into the part. They might have a little riff that gets them into the next section, or some swelling sound that comes in a little early and stays with you. That's a nice way to give you that connective tissue between your parts of your songs. Similar sounds from the previous section. I mean, I know we talked about like having different sounds for different sections, but also to keep things feeling like the same song, having some continuity between your sounds is good. You can connect parts through silences, through little breaks that way. And just introducing new ideas, new melodic ideas, again, new instruments. Introduce a new ideas. I'm an English teacher. Let's fix that. Edit that for the final copy that I give to the club. We don't want plural ideas here. All right. Any other thoughts on like connecting sections? Anyone? That's the last one for that slide. Actually, that is the last slide too. So that's the show, guys. That's the how do I get out of this thing here? There we go. I'll bring you guys back here. So some thoughts on creating transitions between your tracks. It's important. You want things to go. What does it say? How does a sweep cross between sessions? Do you cut it in half? Tom, I don't know if I completely understand that.
You mentioned you could have a sweep that extends from the one session to the next, right?
Section. I meant.
Oh, section.
Yeah.
I was thinking being in session view and you click on the top session and then you click on the second session. You're like, maybe you could cut a sweep in half or something.
Here, let's see. No, you definitely could. Okay. Let's pretend, well, I'll just find anything. Let's look for white noise. It must have something, right? White noise fill. All right, cool. That'll do. Right, so let's take that one here. There's a couple ways we could do this, really. So this is let's make it 2 bars, right? So I'm just going to multiply it. So now it's 2 bars by clicking that times 2. I'll do the same thing on this one here. So if I have my first one up here, when I press play, then that's the second bar. And then I could take this one down here, and we could have this one start at bar 2. So when I press play here, and then my new scene, you can imagine like the next part comes in. We wouldn't want to loop that in this case, I don't think. But that could be one way to do it. Another way could also just be to do your follow actions. So let's see, we got these selected here. We go into our follow actions. So I'm going to put this at legato so that they kind of like go into each other, and then I don't have to do this. And I can have this go from after 1 bar, it will go to the next one 100% of the time. We can even do it the other way around too. We can have this one, take this again 1 bar, and it'll go to previous. So now when I play this, they'll switch between the two and go back and forth between each other. That'll go, whoops, I didn't keep that. In this case, I'd want that looped. So, but that's a way you could do it. You can just break the part in half in session view. A lot of times, though, when I'm this type of stuff, I am doing it in arrangement view. So I'm not necessarily, It depends, you know. There are cases like if this is a live situation, I like to use session view in the live situation. I might set this up like this, but if it was a just a recording and arrangement view, I'd probably just take the swell and just start it at the end of the part and let it ride over into the next section. And you can do that also with like we were talking about effects, like you can put delays on it, reverbs. So the reverb tail and the delays go over into the next section. That can be a nice way to smooth things out too. And the reverse cymbal, you take your let's see, let's get a cymbal here. My 8-bit cymbal. All right, we'll use that. I'll put this right here. We'll zoom way in to actually get to it. We'll have to do this, and we'll just take a copy of it, put it right here for now. I love the key command R. Just press R and it reverses things. And then it's a matter of getting it to how you want it to work out. You know, it's such a silly sounding cymbal, but the idea works. Sometimes like a little fade works nicely. And I often don't like the actual impact of the cymbal to be part of this. So something like that. That's, you know, that's a silly sounding cymbal, but I think the concept works. Often a little bit of reverb helps smooth that out too. Yeah. So yeah, that's those are some thoughts. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas about anything that they want to share, but I will make this little slideshow available. I might even add to it, fill it out a little bit.